And good day. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Should be a lively discussion today. I'm sitting down with Mike Harvey from Bakersfield, 511 Media Group, and he's very much concerned with trying to change California and find hope. One of the big things with California, and I think the apathy, is that so many people have just given up. I think that's the wrong move. I think we're on the brink of being able to change California, and Mike is on the front lines on how to change California. Mike, welcome.
Hey, Eric. Awesome to be here, brother. Thank you so much for having me. And this is cool. This is a different experience. I'm glad to be back at the KXEX studios and hanging with you and the rest of the team. So it's great.
So you've got a plan. You're 501c3, 501c4,
Yes, sir.
511 Media Group.
That's right.
You've got multiple tentacles to this beast. And what is the main thrust of what you're trying to do here in California?
I mean, the main thrust is to turn the state red, right? But, I mean, that's not going to be an overnight thing. It's not going to be a cheap thing. It's not going to be an easy thing. And, you know, even from our own side, we hear people be like, good luck, man. You know, they all want to see it happen, but you're exactly right. When you say that people have kind of given up in ways, a lot of people have. And you know, we've kind of been given three choices in this state for a long time. It's either sit around, complain, and do nothing, which is probably the majority of people.
Hey, they're good at it. They got that down.
Unfortunately. Well, and a lot of it's because they don't know what they can do and they feel hopeless and powerless, right? And you know, that's kind of what we're trying to do, is give power back to the people. But number two is leave, which is something I actually did for a short period of time, and I know you know part of that story too, Eric. Yep. But number three is actually stand up and do something about it. But when you go to stand up and do something about it, you're like, well, what do I do? Do I go, you know, and there's all these different organizations across the state. Some of them have, you know, one chapter. Some of them, like, you know, one of the groups run the California Republican Assembly. They have several chapters throughout the state. We got the Republican Women and the GOP and so many other things. But the one of the many problems that we've faced in our you know, past several decades of this, all of these groups are disjointed and they don't work together. And, you know, we kind of tend to be our own biggest enemy in the party. And instead of focusing on trying to overcome the essentially
There's a key difference in how conservatives, I think liberals somewhat used to be this way, but they've walked away from it. It's like the Borg has invaded, if you're a Star Trek fan, and taken over every bit of the liberals.
Yeah.
And so it's all for the collective. There's not a sense of individual freedom. It's, you could say, well, Marxism is the cool new thing when it comes to the left. Well, the right, we're divided and we're independent. We tend to be independent business owners, things like that, and we all want to have our say. There's got to be some middle ground there where we can agree on, for instance, biblical values. Most of the right would agree on those values, frankly, even if they are Sikh, because that set of values, they largely align.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, well, and I completely agree with that, right? So we are the party of free thinkers, which is kind of crazy, right? Because the left for so many decades was considered the party of the free thinkers, but we've, as you know, conservatives have become that party, and like you said, many of us are business owners or leaders in one capacity or another. Large majority of us, whether we're Christian or some other religion, or even atheist, because our party does have atheists, hold to the same set of moral and ethical standards, but you know how we go about doing those things and you know some of the minor technicalities, what we need to learn to do is come together for the overall bigger picture and the good, and say, hey, you know what? I disagree with you on this. I disagree with you on that. And frankly, I think that this applies even outside of the conservatives. I think liberals and conservatives need to be able to come together to the same table and understand, hey, we actually agree on a lot more than we would admit to. And when it comes to liberal versus conservative, a lot of the times it's more of how to actually address those issues than it is whether or not we agree on the issues. Now, there's some extremist issues, but many of them...
Well, at least they agree on the problems. For instance, Trump and Bernie Sanders, they absolutely agreed on a list of problems, but their solutions were profoundly different.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so coming back to the Conservative Party on that, we need to be able to say,
we don't have a conservative party. We have the Republican that are closer to conservative.
I tend to talk about it in terms of conservative liberal more than Republican Democrat, and most of us in the Republican Party are conservatives, and there's even libertarians. And anyway, I'm digressing. But my point is, we need to learn to say, hey, we got maybe a candidate that we agree with 80% of what they have to say. We got this other 20%, but I'd rather have someone in a position of authority that I disagree with 20% of what they have to say than is 100% against everything I stand for.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I think conservatives need to realize is that politics is the art of compromise. So you have to decide what's most important to you. Okay, let's say there's 10 things.
Mm-hmm.
Which 3 can't you move on?
Right.
And everything else, you should be willing to get the best deal you can.
Right. And that's a business philosophy too, right? You're not always going to get 100% of everything you want, but if we start from a point of, okay, well, let's get that 70-80% of what we want, and we can shift that over time also, right? We don't just have to fully sell out and accept, well, there's just those issues we're never. No, you take the ground incrementally. Like I know that Shanna Grove, right? She's a good friend of mine, and I think she's probably a friend of yours, but she had this sex trafficking bill, right? Can I say that on air?
Yes, you can.
She had this sex trafficking bill, and she had to compromise, and it was a big compromise, but compromise and say, hey, we're going to exclude the 16 and 17-year-olds from that. Well, she knew that once she was able to get that over the finish line, she's going to go back for the remaining of it, and I think that it's doing pretty well. A lot of people are like, well, that just makes sense. And in my opinion, I don't care if you're 40 years old. That should be a felony across the board, regardless of age. But you got to take the chunks as you can get them, gain ground instead of completely conceding because you can't get 100% of it.
Well, everybody also focuses on the big issue, the top of the ticket, and I believe if we really want change here in California, it starts with local. So getting good
100%.
people on school boards, getting good people on the city council, frankly, getting people that maybe you're not willing to run, but you are willing to spend some time on the planning commission or other appointed boards as a way to get familiarized with what happens with government, because maybe you don't feel confident. I go to city council meetings all the time, and on a regular basis, I have to look up the specialized language that they speak in. Instead of saying we put something out for bid, there's a regular bid and then there's an RFD.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a little intimidating if you've never been to a city council meeting. A lot of times you're like, what in the world are they talking about? School board, they have their own specialized language.
Right.
So I would encourage people to step out, just go to a meeting. Go show up early, talk to people. If you show up early, most politicians are willing to speak to you. And do you have a voice at the table if you don't know your local representatives? If the only time you show up is to yell at them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're worthy of yelling at. They're not going to want to hear you the rest of the time.
Well, I think one of the big challenges you have, you and I, of course, we know, right? But a lot of people just have no idea of how to get involved or where to get involved. I talk to people every single day. They're just like, hey, we care about our country. We care about our state. We care about the direction we're going in. and I actually want to do something and be involved, but I don't know where to plug in. I don't know how to plug in. And that was me for a long time too, Eric. I didn't know where to go, where to plug in. Just I would have been involved in this stuff probably at a much, much earlier age, like 18, 19 years old, because I was passionate and I cared. And I listened to a lot of, at the time it was mainly like Sean Hannity and Glenn Beck, and there's been some new ones since then. But
you're younger than me because Rush Limbaugh always comes first.
Oh, okay. You're 100% right. I forget about him because he's no longer with us, sadly. But yeah, he was the king, right? Mm-hmm. But I listened to those things. I listened to the radio, and I would always talk amongst my friends and share my opinion. But when it came to plugging in or getting involved in things, I had no clue or no idea how to do that. And the sad part is, a lot of these groups, I think that they have a desire, but they have no idea also how to go out and, reach out to young people, for example. And we talk about that in many of the groups that you and I are in too, Eric. But the way to do it is just to get out in front of the people. And sometimes that means going to places that are uncomfortable. I go on a pretty regular basis to college campuses with another friend of ours from Turning Point USA. And, I go into churches, meet with pastors. In fact, we have a pastor and ministry leader meetup tonight in Bakersfield, California. And we're doing those on a monthly basis, and we're doing those in different cities across the state as well. So you got to go to the people where they're at and meet them where they're at, because most of the time, even if they want to, they don't even know how to come to us or come to you.
I see the church as one of the places where there's great apathy and great hope, all rolled into one. Mm-hmm. So many churches seem to think that, well, we can't step into politics at all. Well, they don't actually have to completely step into politics. That they need to do is defend their biblical values and talk about how those values affect everyday issues. They're like, well, but God makes all the decisions. Well, I'm not going to argue that point, but I'm going to say that faith without good works is hollow. So not participating in your everyday community didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I personally know a lot of pastors that do want to be involved, and
you're fortunate because
I made a point to go and find them.
But I know more that don't.
That's probably true, but I think that a lot of them are scared, or maybe just don't know how to go about doing that, how to plug in, how to talk to their congregation about political issues. And they shouldn't even be political issues, right? Because they're moral and ethical issues a lot of the times. And there's certainly that's exactly what the church is made for, right? But the media and the left and kind of some voices have intimidated those churches with the Johnson Act. Hey, you're going to lose your 501c3 and these kind of things. Well, there's a whole bunch of ways to navigate that, whether that's to have a 501c4. You have a 501c4 and they can do almost anything you want. But even under the guise of the 501c3, you can do much more than you think that you can do. And we have never, not to my knowledge, have we ever seen a church stripped of its 501c3 for its stances on political issues. It's more of an intimidation act than it is anything else. And the left knows it, and they won't challenge it because they know if it gets taken to the Supreme Court, it very likely will be overturned.
Well, I know that wall builders, I'm a big fan of wall builders,
yeah.
David Barton, they've purposely set out to piss off the left and try to get a lawsuit because they want it to go to the Supreme Court because they're confident they'll win.
Right.
So they're one of the places that is trying to get the left and trying to prove by stepping a little over the line and prove that, no, there's really no teeth in this threat that we're going to steal or we're going to take away your nonprofit status. So I wish more pastors were aware of that. I'm also have watched videos. I've never attended a leftist church, but I've watched videos where they completely did what I thought was stepped over the line. No, maybe, wow. They proceeded to call Trump evil, and whatever Democrat they had up there speaking was the best thing ever. And this was in church from the pulpit. They didn't have any consequences.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely, because the left is the ones in charge of many of those institutions. Have you at least heard of, if not read, the Shepherds for Sale?
No, I've never read that.
Megan Basham. Okay, so in that book, and she does a lot with Daily Wire. So seen her speak and have purchased her book. Good read, is very, very educational and informative about the issues in the church and how they kind of came about. But a lot of what she talks about is how the left has kind of infiltrated the seminaries and the churches, and kind of started over time eroding on issues like global warming or climate change, immigration, and eventually, after a period of time, broken into even, a lot of racial divide issues, a lot of LGBTQ issues, and all of those things. And over time, the congregations have changed, and so I see churches where it's interesting, and not that we don't want to accept them. I think that God's message is for everybody, not just I know that God's message is for everybody, and all of them need to hear it, but they also need to hear the truth that, hey, if you're living in sin, whatever that lifestyle may be, like if it's a homosexual lifestyle or if it's something else, and I will make a point that I don't necessarily construe homosexuality as any necessarily bigger or different sin than being a drug addict, right? Mm-hmm. But we don't go and condone addiction. We don't say, hey, well, you should just accept them because they're a drug addict. But then when it comes to these lifestyle issues, we're like, oh no, it's okay. No, the Bible is very clear about what that says when it comes to those issues. But we've started seeing more and more of those people feel not just go to the church, which is great, I'm glad they're there, but feel like very, very comfortable in their lifestyle while attending church. And I think that that's interesting, and probably something that it should be looked at.
I think it's summarized really simply as love the sinner, hate the sin.
Yeah, 100%.
And if we just simply live by that, it would be much simpler. You also mentioned youth. All we're going to do is have time to touch on this, and then we'll have to go to break. But okay. You worked some with Turning Point. I've worked some with Turning Point. I've worked a little bit with Young Republicans. Those are the places where it's relatively easy to connect with them. Not that I'm saying it's easy. It's not. We have to build a bridge. Where else can we go? What's those uncomfortable places in schools? Are there opportunities?
Yeah, there's 100% opportunities. So I don't know if you've been, but I've been many times, and in fact, we're going to even double down on this effort in the coming semesters in the fall and those things. But going out to college campuses, it's not that difficult to actually get a table on a college campus, regardless of where you stand on things. Now, you may get some haters that come out, and very likely, depending on what college you're at. But going to the people and actually being in front of them and having a open mind is a good place to start.
Yeah. I think that one of the things you can do is, if you have some sort of specialized speech, like I've really thought about this, I just have not implemented it yet, but I want to go in and be able to talk about the Constitution for a few minutes, even if it was just the First Amendment or just the Second Amendment. I think teachers that will have me in, and I look forward to that opportunity. I just have not had a chance yet.
So the better way to go about that, Eric, is actually to set up a table on campus. You can work with the school office. It is public property, so we can.
Well, college, yes. I was thinking high school.
Oh, high school. Okay, so that's a little bit different to navigate, and I don't know quite the answer on that. I do have some ideas about how to go about that as well, which that's kind of really getting into the weeds. But I know on college you can go on college and pass out pamphlets and talk to people without a table. Mm-hmm. But even with the table, especially if you're sanctioned by a club, but even if you're not sanctioned by a club, you can just go on campus and get a permit to be there and have a conversation with the students.
We're going to go ahead and go to our first break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I want to say thank you to everybody that's listening on social media. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Sharing seems to be the one that's helping me the most lately, but any of those are appreciated. I try to respond to all comments. I would say that sometimes they don't make sense to me and I don't know what to say, like they're not on topic, so I tend not to respond to those. But otherwise, hey, it's your free speech. You're welcome to. Let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I am joined by Mike Harvey from 511 Media Group, and we're just kind of talking about, kind of spitballing about where to find places to get involved, how to make a difference, how to connect with what I consider to be this larger movement. There were multiple conservative clubs that were pre-COVID, but there was kind of an explosion in interest in founding principles and returning to founding principles. And conservative groups going, hey, I want to do something. They saw how our freedoms were absolutely trampled during COVID, and they wanted to get out and make a difference. I'm one of those people. I always paid attention to politics, but I didn't ever get involved, aside from talking to my friends and neighbors and family. I didn't get involved until COVID. COVID was like, uh-oh, this is real. It's time for me to do everything I can so that I can look at the next generation and say, I did my best. I did my part to defend freedom for this next little piece. So what are you going to do with kids? Aside from getting a table, what do you do? Do you just talk to them? What's the plan when you're out there at a table?
So there's kind of three basic formulas that work, right? You can do an AMA, ask me anything.
Okay. You
can do a change my mind. You can do a debate.
Okay.
And there's other things you can do, but you
don't want to just go give flyers by themselves aren't helpful. You need to engage.
Well, the biggest thing that I've learned is, and I was just listening to a podcast from Charlie talking about this. It's all about relationships.
Okay.
You got to build relationships with people, and it's very grassroots. You have to get in there, have conversations, but not just, hey, I think you're an idiot, go away. But let me hear you out and understand why you think that, and let me talk to you about why I think what I think. And I might be able to have some persuasion over you in that, because I will likely give you some ideas to think about that you hadn't thought about before. But it's not just going and making someone look stupid or feel stupid. It's actually quite the opposite. In building relationships, you're going to get a lot further once someone has a relationship with you. Then they're willing to listen and trust you. And there's ways of actually doing those relationships at scale. But initially, you want to just have one-on-ones.
So you build from the connection.
You build from the connection, yeah.
Rather than you tell them what to do, you have to hear people first. That's one of the first things I heard you say is you need to hear them first to start the dialogue. That kind of has them, when that happens, when people feel heard, now all of a sudden they don't feel so threatened. They might also be able to hear you.
Right. And anytime I go, whether it's with and I've had lunch with staunch liberals. Anytime I go to lunch, anytime I go to coffee, anytime I go anywhere with someone, I spend more time listening than I do talking. And you've seen me even do that in person, Eric. But I make a point to do that because you're going to build a much better bond with somebody by listening. For some reason, it's just human psychology, right? If you're listening to someone, you take the time to not just hear them, but actually listen to what they're having to say, then they know that you care, whether they agree with you or not. And showing them that you care is one of the most important, one of the most crucial elements of building that bond and that relationship.
So it's not all, because conservatives and liberals are kind of put in two camps. Liberals are all about emotion and conservatives are all about rational thought. The truth is it's somewhere in the middle.
100%. I mean, I do try to be rational and try to think things through, and I try to be objective even when people are against me. But I also do care very deeply, and that caring is emotional, about the future for my kids. I care about the future for my family. I care about putting food on the table, as do all of your listeners and all of your viewers. And yes, there's logic behind that, but there's also a lot of emotion, whether that's anger or whether that's, sadness or whatever, that you feel. I'm heartbroken when I see certain things that are going on in our country, certain things that our kids are having to deal with that we never dealt with. I remember growing up in California, Eric, and I'm sure you even more so. Remember growing up in California, we drank from the water hose. We stayed out till the streetlights came on, and nobody ever worried about where we were. Nobody ever thought twice about drinking from the water hose. And now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't dream of letting my kids do that. I mean, the water hose is one thing, but going down the street without knowing where they are and being gone for hours and hours and hours.
Well, I think that's because we've set up a situation where there's no consequences to crime.
Yeah.
If there's no consequences, then criminals tend to do more. So it's what they call petty crime tends to multiply.
Uh-huh.
We've also kind of lost all of these community groups. Not entirely. We still have it some through churches. We still have it through some groups. But it used to be, when I was a kid, much more common where once a week you had a family dinner, and it wasn't your immediate family. It was every family member that was nearby, or, you had neighborhood parties and people were more connected. And now it's so easy to just look at your phone or watch TV and not even know your neighbors. I'm a little guilty of this, largely because I spend almost all my social time either at what I do for a living or this, which is for fun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know some of my neighbors very well at all. I'm guilty of this. But if I was to get out and speak to random people or neighbors, then we'd have a better bond. We'd be more likely to watch out for each other. I think that is a little microcosm of what should be happening at a larger level, that if we talk to each other, we understood each other a little bit, maybe this unique American experience, maybe it really is a melting pot, but we have to interact with one another.
Well, it's interesting because I've lived in Texas and I've lived in California. And in Texas, it is much more like you do talk to your neighbors. You do know your neighbors. You have relationships with them. And here in California, like everybody walks from their car to their house, gets inside, and shuts the door. They walk from their house to their car, drive to work or wherever they're going. And very rarely does anybody talk to each other. Now, in my family, my kids actually have relationships with most of the neighbors. And a lot of them are older folks. But they actually know what's going on, and so the neighbors do watch out for my kids.
Well, but see, that created a community.
Yeah.
Simply by interacting. I think that can be recreated, and it doesn't matter whether you're in California or crazy New York. It's how do you interact with the people around you, and once they care about you and you care about them, you're much more likely to protect each other.
Oh, yeah.
Look for best interests.
Case in point, you look at how people treat each other online. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it between friends that they'll trash talk each other online, and then you see them interact in person, and you're like, weren't you guys just berating each other? Now you're buddies? Like, so I do think that there's something about social media and something about being online that desensitizes us and desensitizes our society, and we think, well, I'm not talking to a real person, I'm talking to a computer. Well, yeah, but the way that was received by that real person is something that they're going to carry with them. So the next time you see them, like, we need to be mindful of the conversation we're having online.
So you mentioned kind of strategies for sitting at a table. Have you had a chance to meet like Charlie Kirk and watch him in action? I've never met him at this point.
Yeah, in fact, I think I showed you a while back. We were during the 2024 election, we were actually in their office. I made a point of not, because I'm never one to fanboy or any of that kind of crap. I don't believe in that. But my kids have a picture with Charlie, and they've spent time with him, and we've been in the office in a much more intimate setting than what you normally see at these big rallies that are tens of thousands of people. And so, yeah, I've seen him in action, seen how he operates, and for me, I actually look at him as very much an example, a role model of how we're building our movement.
Well, he's very consistently polite to people, lets them speak, sets up some boundaries. In other words, it's going to be a discussion, not they're going to yell at him or he's going to yell at them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that he always convinces. I'd say he often doesn't convince the person that's up there speaking of much of anything.
Right.
What we have to remember is that there's a whole crowd watching.
Uh-huh.
What if he got just one person in that crowd to consider a different perspective? I think that's what's powerful. And then when that gets shared out to the world, well, he's convincing people continually.
Well, the other thing that happens after the fact, Eric, is the conservative kids, after Charlie comes and visits a campus, feel more empowered to actually step up and speak their mind and not be disrespectful or not be rude, because I don't think that holds to any of our values. And of course that's going to happen from time to time. There's always that numbskull that wants to make bad decisions or make us look bad. I get mad at those people too, because I'm like, man, understand what you're representing. One, if you're a Christian, you're representing God. Like, what kind of example are you setting for that? But even if you're not, like, I don't like these people that go and yell and cuss at other people. Hey, I'm MAGA, and yeah, I love the whole MAGA movement and everything it stands for. But those people are not my example of who I am or what the movement is about, right? So but I do think that, and in fact I know, because I've talked to them, the students that are on that side, that are more conservative, that hold to those values, feel like, oh, it's okay to be who I am on this campus.
Well, I think the left does a great job of trying to isolate and make conservatives like we're not the majority.
Yeah.
And I would say that this is a center-right country, and that the
100%.
generation that's in high school and college now, they're the most conservative generation we've seen in more than 75 years.
Yeah.
They leave me with a lot of hope, but we have to set up a situation where they can thrive.
Yeah.
So there comes in, if I'm speaking to parents or grandparents, there's where your part comes in, that you need to protect liberty. I hesitate to say protect freedom, because freedom means do whatever you want. Liberty comes with duty and responsibility.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that our republic requires us to be citizens that are engaged, that are active. And so I want people to get out there. If they were interested in your group, well, how would they look you up?
Simple, makecagreatagain.com. It's our website. You can find us online, 511 Media Group. Those are the best two places to go, makecagreatagain.com. And we're doing events all the time. We're working with you and Susan and some others here in Fresno to actually do an event. What is it, next Wednesday? No, it's a little bit further out than that.
A little further out.
June 25th on a Wednesday evening at Schoolhouse.
I think we went with Wednesday. I don't know. There was talk about Wednesday and Saturday. So I don't know.
I think we nailed down the date. But anyway, if you get on the email list, put in your name, email, phone number at makecagreatagain.com. We'll make sure that everybody gets notified about all the events that are coming out. And we make a point to make as many of our events. Of course, we have to do some fundraising. So we have a fundraiser coming up June 19th. Hopefully you'll be there for that, Eric. But we make as many of our events as accessible as possible. We make them free for, especially when they're just not fundraiser events. And we make a point to get as many youth there as we can. So we have, our local Turning Point rep will be there. YR. We have some YR and some other.
So that's young
20 to
Republicans for anybody that didn't know.
Sorry, I was speaking a little bit of inside baseball, but yeah, young Republicans groups, which is I think they're 40 and under is in those groups. But we make a point, especially like we'll put a table aside specifically so they can come, and those are the guys that definitely don't have a whole lot of money most of the time. So we make space for them.
I've been involved in what was called the Great American Freedom Revival pretty much from the start. I was not on the committee the very first year, but I'm the guy that I'm like, well, here you need to talk to this person, you need to talk to this person. So I was instrumental each time we've had it. We invited pastors to come for free. We had a lot of trouble getting them there. We invited Turning Point people to come for free. We invited young Republicans to come for free to this event. And we had trouble getting them there. What's the secret?
Well, it goes back to, as I was mentioning before, relationship. So when I'm inviting these people, it's not just, hey, here's an open invite to whoever's in your club. It is, right? But
it'd been better to go speak to their club during a meeting for a few minutes.
Yeah, but also build a bond with them, right? And that's something that God has gifted me with, the ability to connect with people and form relationships and build relationships. And so when we're inviting people, first of all, a lot of the times I or Adriana's already gone and spoken at the club, but we also have reached out and said, hey, I would really like you to be there. I have a special seat assigned for you, and make a point, and not just to do it on a superficial level, but to actually be genuine and authentic about it, to make them feel like you care and make them feel special.
I think that all of the bigger podcasters that are truly successful, the reason that they're successful is because they're genuine.
Yeah.
Because they have something they're passionate about, something they care about, and that comes through. So here we have the same idea of building relationships. When you're a conservative, especially when I was a kid, I was never the kid that hesitated to speak up, but I knew a whole lot of kids that, they were afraid of being embarrassed. They didn't speak up, even though they truly believed in something. And that just kind of multiplies its way out into adulthood, where so many people are afraid to speak up. The First Amendment is profound in that it enshrines your right. It actually delineates what your rights are. And because of that, we have the opportunity to say whatever we want, even offensive things. But the left has created this woke doctrine that not only are you not allowed to say it, but we will punish you if you say something we don't like. So it's in effect limited free speech, because people, as soon as they think it, they're like, oh God, well, I couldn't say that. Instead of just moving from a place of your values and talking about what you believe is right. I won't always agree with you, but at least if you were real and genuine, I would respect it. Even if I thought you were profoundly wrong. And we seem to have, and a lot of people seem to have forgotten that, though that is shifting. That is woke is starting to die. I hope it actually dies.
Yeah.
Or at least I'd like to keep one example so we can parade it around and go, yeah, we don't want to do that again.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of people, I'm trying to be careful with what I say, Eric, but a lot of people are worried what other people think, are worried about, they have insecurities and all these things. And I think that's another thing that God blessed me with at a younger age, like when I was in high school. I used to be more introverted, more shy, if anybody who knows me can imagine that. But through sports and excelling at sports, I learned to have confidence. And now I have a lot of confidence, and sometimes some may say that I have too much confidence, but I don't worry so much about what other people think as far as, are they going to judge me or what are they going to think from that level? And frankly, I don't think anybody should worry about that. I don't think if you're watching this or listening to this, it's not something that you guys should be, oh, what are they going to think? Are they going to judge me? Like, when they find out what you're about, they're going to do that anyway. If they were going to do that, they're going to do that anyway. Right? Mm-hmm. What I do care about is if I unintentionally hurt somebody. I care about that deeply. But if I speak the truth and someone says, oh, I don't like that, or, that makes me mad, or that hurts my feelings or whatever, I was like, I'm sorry, I spoke the truth. I wasn't trying to hurt you. But if the truth hurts, maybe you should analyze that a little bit.
Yeah. On that note, we're going to go ahead and take our last break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. So, Mike, I always like to focus on hope and solutions. So we can talk about some fundraisers. We can talk about why you're enthusiastic about this, why you believe that California can flip. Let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I am joined by Mike Harvey from the 511 Media Group. Make California red again.
Yep.
Welcome.
511 Media Group, 511 Impact, and 511 Action, all under the 511 banner. And for anybody who might be, well, what does 511 mean? First of all, it has nothing to do with the tactical store. Second of all, it's two different Bible verses. So initially it was 1 Thessalonians 5:11, which says, encourage one another just as you've been doing, depending on what translation you're looking at. But the second one that I adopted after the fact was Ephesians 5:11, which says, have no part with the works of darkness and also expose them. So I as a man of faith, that's the number one most important thing to me. And I care about what direction our country, our society is going in. So on the break, Eric, we were talking about, why do I feel optimistic about this? And first of all, I very strongly believe, in fact, I know that God called me to do what I'm doing. And God wouldn't just call me to do something and then say, oh, well, I just want you to be busy. I expect you to fail. No. I remember working on the election campaign in 2024, and there was a moment on November 5th, election watch party, where we had watched Trump win Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I'm gonna take a break real quick, go down the hall, and 30 seconds later, my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter, who I made a point to have my 11-year-old and my 9-year-old and my 7-year-old, they were all knocking doors. They were making phone calls. They were talking to other people. So real quick side note, there's no age that's too young or too old to be involved. Mm-hmm. But I recorded this for posterity because it was such a monumental moment in my life. My daughter was excited beyond belief. Daddy, we won. We were over the mark. We were over 270. And I recorded that moment and I said, I want to remember where I was when we saved the Republic. And that was such a profound and monumental moment. Well, fast forward a little bit. I started looking at the map of California and seeing how it shifted from blue to red and realizing that, hey, we can make a difference. And through talking to other people and through talking to the Lord in prayer, and I'm condensing this down, obviously, but I learned, well, I think we can, I strongly believe we can flip California. Many others do. In fact, God believes we can. And I think that carries a lot of weight in and of itself. But he said, I want you to go and do it, and I want you to lead the movement. I said, okay. And as I've traveled this state, and as I've talked to a ton of people, whether it's in LA, in the Bay, obviously Central Valley is very conservative.
Well, it's got to start someplace like here.
Yeah.
Here's the foundation we have to build from here.
Even in these big metropolitan areas, Eric, people believe that we need a change, and I believe that we can get a change. There's a lot of things that need to happen, and we're working on many facets of those. And if you're watching this or listening, you come to one of our events, you'll find out what some of those things are. We have formal partnerships with Turning Point USA on both the C3 and the 501c4 side, but we are doing things, and in fact, their staff has told us, hey, you guys are the only ones that we're aware of in California that are doing this thing. You guys are modeled exactly after Turning Point USA in the way that you're structured, and they will be coming to California at some point. And I don't know if I'm at liberty to disclose exactly when or where, but they said we want to partner directly with you, 511 and Mike.
Well, they made a huge difference in Arizona.
Oh,
so I'm hoping,
made a huge difference
and I
in
know
Arizona.
that Charlie is quite ambitious, so I think it's coming.
The fact that they're coming, they are coming. They believe it too, right? So, but again, this isn't going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of money. This is going to be a monumental effort, but this is the hill I'm going to die on. So, if you're out there and you're like, hey, how do I get involved? Again, go to our website, makecagreatagain.com. We obviously are always looking for additional funds because just one aspect of the things that we're working on is going to take about $3 million to accomplish, right? But I very much believe my father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He can deliver any kind of finances that he wants at any time he wants. We are holding a fundraiser at Rio Bravo Country Club in Bakersfield, California. So the first of many. We'll be holding them in the Fresno Clovis area.
And what's the date on that?
June 19th. June 19th at 6 p.m., Rio Bravo Country Club. You can check that out on our website, makecagreatagain.com. But we're already planning events for San Luis Obispo County, Monterey County, Fresno County, so this thing is going to happen regardless of whoever might try to stop us, whoever might want to try to prevent us, or what naysayers might be out there and says, oh, I don't know. We are going to make a difference in Jesus' name.
You have a great speaker for June 19th.
We do. Shannon Grove, yeah, another dear friend of mine. She's right in our corner, and we've actually put together a great lineup. We have a highly followed band that's going to be there. Shannon will be there. We'll have several other speakers. We've assembled a professional team, and I say we. Really, the Lord has assembled a professional team, and He's bringing the right people at the right time, as He always does. The Lord always provides and brings provision.
I will agree with that. I would also say that with great speakers, people get enthused.
Yeah.
One of the things that was hardest for me when I decided that, wow, I needed to step out and make a difference was that I was essentially alone. So we shut down March 18th of 2020, and by I don't remember the date, but somewhere around the 25th of March, like 7, maybe 10 days later, I was out protesting on one of the local streets, one that's less than a mile away from here.
Uh-huh.
But I was largely alone. And I was like, well, this isn't going to work because people, when you stand alone, they kind of think you're crazy. They might admire you, and some will, but nobody wants to join you. Once there's a movement, once there's now all of a sudden 20 people, you realize how incredibly strong we the people, that whole concept is. Our founding fathers, that when they fought for this country, it wasn't that all of them and all of the populace was involved in the Revolutionary War. Somewhere between 3 and 6% of the people put in their money and fought. The rest of the people kind of stood on the sidelines. They might have helped a little here, done this or that. They weren't actively involved. So let's say it's 6%. 6% defeated the largest army in the world, the largest navy by far, in England, created a republic, and freedom has been ringing across the globe ever since. That whole story, when I realized how few it was, they changed the world with 6%. We got more than 6% now. We just have to get organized.
Well, we got nearly 45% now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you realize that.
Mm-hmm.
That is,
well, in the Central Valley, absolutely.
Yeah, but that is another thing that we have to overcome, and we're working on it. And again, we don't have time to get into details of that, but we have 17% representation. We have 45% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot more conservatives in this state than anybody realizes. In fact, in 2020, we had more people vote for Trump in California than in any other state.
Mm-hmm. Now, that part of that's because of population. But that's still, Trump's a lightning rod.
Yeah.
And yet he seems to attract people like a magnet.
Well, because they like somebody who's strong and will stand for the truth.
Stand for the truth and be real.
Yeah.
Rather than just tell them what they want to hear.
That's right.
Well, we're down to about 15 seconds. Any final thought?
Final thought, if you're out there watching, go check out makecagreatagain.com. I think you're going to love what you see and what you hear there.
Well, Mike, I thank you for this time. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town.